Okay, hi everyone. My name's Sharon Richardson. I'm going to be doing an overview for information workers for SharePoint 2010 today. Thanks for coming in. This is one of the new sessions. I literally was brought into speaking 24 hours ago, so a little bit short notice. We've pulled the information together for you today. Very, very brief background of who I am. I've been working with SharePoint for just over 10 years now. 6 of those years were spent at Microsoft, from the beginning of 2000 through to the end of 2005. Since then, I've been an independent consultant, actually doing a lot of the similar stuff as I was doing at Microsoft, but without the added requirement of doing the licensing side. I tend to focus on SharePoint in terms of what it can do. What are the kind of solutions you can build with it? And as much as possible, what can be done out of the box. There's no code in this session. I'm not going to write code. I'm not going to talk about infrastructure. There are separate IT Pro and Dev tracks for that. So if you are interested in the deeper, geeky technical stuff, this isn't the session. This is going to be much more at high level. What can it do? Also, it's the first session after the keynote, and you've got 3 days ahead of you of lots and lots of sessions. There is no PowerPoint in this session. This is all demo. So you'll have death by PowerPoint, I'm sure, later on. But we're going to actually have a look at it. Just before I do get started, just check, how many people here are working with SharePoint 2007 today? And yeah, I was going to say, I was hoping most of you. And if you're in partners now, if you're working with organisations that have deployed and they've deployed SharePoint 2007, is it most people? You'd say working, yeah. How many of those have also deployed Office 2007? If you could show me. And if you could put your hand up now, if you've not, if they're still using an older version of Office. That's what I suspected, the majority are on older. Of those who are using Office 2007, how many of the users have been trained on it? Wow, we've got about 1 or 2. There's a reason for all this, and because obviously Office 2007, and I'm assuming most of you here have seen some form of Office 2007, was quite a big change because it brought the ribbon in, that new user interface at the top. Thing is, if you deployed SharePoint 2007, it knew no such concept. It was still your standard browser application. So you just worked within Office. What's interesting is this version's introducing that ribbon into SharePoint. And it's quite a curious one because it's actually quite useful if you haven't been deploying Office 2007 because you can kind of now kill 2 birds with 1 stone. It's going to be a shock, don't get me wrong, for end users. But that ribbon will go across both, which I think is a lot easier for them. Okay, just to dive in. First things first, it is a demo. The whole next 50 minutes to an hour is going to be demo. I'm running the SharePoint 2010 technical preview, the beta 2. It's not perfect, far from it. There are bugs, and I'm going to try and avoid hitting any of those particular rabbit holes, but forewarned is forearmed. Also, I have to do the caveat that some of the features may have changed by RTM. I'll point out at least one feature I hope has been nuked and removed. But there's a couple of features, it's a real shame, that aren't working that I can't show you. And I have to have at least one pun about a volcano. Yeah, they get angry. My bribes to the demo gods has never worked. I always joke that the minute I plug a projector into my laptop, it's like the film Gremlins, you know, never feed them after midnight or don't give them water. It's like don't plug a projector in before 10 o'clock in the morning because they just go into the computer. Anyway, straight into the demo. Now I have to apologise, it's easy for me to sit down, so I'm going to disappear behind the lectern. Any questions, not a problem, but if I don't spot your hand, just sort of cough very loudly or butt or do something to get my attention. And I should have asked one last question. Hands up if you've already seen SharePoint 2010. Seen it a lot or just a smidgen? I mean, I would say if you've seen a lot, I'm probably not going to show you too much new. If you've already seen things like calendar overlays, the social networking, how the search has changed, that's the kind of thing I'm going to talk about. So I do want to just advise that's what we're going through. Okay, so this is a homepage for SharePoint 2010. Some of it is not that much different to 2007. You've got navigation along the top, which will show you any sub-sites that exist under that navigation. I've got navigation down the left-hand side. That's all fairly straightforward. The bar up here has changed a little bit. Search has dropped down into the global navigation area. This is going to kill everyone that's got a very long global navigation already. If you've already got lots and lots of tabs along the top, make room, because search is now going to fit into that space as well. I've got it set up. It's searched this site, searched people. Very, very similar to 2007. Still got the recycle bin, and I've also got all site content. So visually it's a little bit different, but not huge. A couple of features that are new sitting over here in the top right corner. So we've got an I like it feature. That would be the one I'd like to see go away, but we'll find out when RTM is actually available. I can say I like this feature, I like this page, I like this document. It's a beautiful tag, but I'm not entirely sure of its benefits inside an organisation. It's not YouTube. There may be a session during the next 3 days that will show you how to build YouTube on SharePoint. For that, I like it would be wonderful. But for most, I think, companies, I like it's a bit weird. Tags and notes is a bit more fun. We'll come back to that where you can tag everything as you go along. We'll dive straight over into the search. I'm just going to do a search for information worker. I should also stress, this is not the Contoso demo. There's nothing canned here. This is literally a fresh installation of SharePoint 2010 with enough content to show you some of the concepts. So there's no customizations, no add-ons, nothing. If you installed it tomorrow, you could do everything that you see today. So first things first, looking at the search results. Again, there are some similarities. It's not too scary here. We've still got things like the All Sites and the People tabs. You got those out of the box with SharePoint 2007. We can say the number of results we've got, and we can see those results. Still got a blue title, still got a black summary text, still got grey properties and a green link which shows you the URL. That part is very, very consistent, the same as before. Obviously, what's very new is everything down here on the left-hand side. We're seeing by result type, I can refine down to show me the PowerPoints, and it'll just straight away take it down to PowerPoints. I can look at authors and see, oh, there's Jim Gray, excellent researcher who was lost to MS Research, and I've got one of his presentations here. If that's taken it down so far, that's not the one I was looking for, I can just click back on any result type, and I can go up and down. So it's all about filtering results. This is kind of a philosophy we're seeing across the board with internet type and search solutions. Do a very broad search to begin with, filter on the results, rather than trying to present that advanced search page up front, put in your query, check a few boxes, refine it to this level up front. Don't do any of that. Do it like Google. Type in a few words, get a lot of stuff, and refine it down from the search results set. The way these tags are coming in, as we scroll down, we've got tags here. If I just do show more, we've got some different information. And the clue is that little tag note that you see in the top right corner. As content gets tagged, those words are also indexed, and they start to build this sidebar of filtering. So I've actually done some tags by decisions. Let's see what's tagged by decision. A few more, yeah, paradox of choice, decision evolution, that makes sense. So it's all about helping refine. What's also interesting, if we see the authors here, I've got any author, the administrator, Caroline Green, we've got Microsoft internal. I think I uploaded a very old presentation into this demo. And we've got my name. My name, Sharon Richardson and Microsoft Internal, doesn't exist on this demo. They're not user accounts. So it has pulled those properties out of the documents as they were uploaded, in addition to the authors that then modify the document. So you're seeing that dual, properties that exist only within SharePoint, but also if they do exist in those documents, it pulls those through. Here's one of the tips, though, for planning deployment. That is good and bad. Most people don't go into Word or PowerPoint and go create new and start with a blank one. Most of us steal somebody else's document first. Even if it's the template, it's like, oh, that'll do. And it is, it's that'll do. Delete all their content and put your own content in its place. But when you create a new document in Office, those initial properties that get captured, so you create new, when you first save, it'll pick who's logged into this computer. That must be the author, the first date created. Those properties don't then change, not unless you manually go into them. And it's something a lot of people don't realise. They'll upload that document, and that author might be somebody who left the organisation 5 years ago or died. You know, it could be quite terrible. And it's something to be aware of, because these things become much more visible in this version because it all gets pulled out and put into the search. So good and bad. On the one side, lots of good, great filtering. But you may get some shocks as content comes through if those tags start to come out of very old documents. We've got a people search as well. If I just click over onto the people tag, it'll do very much the similar as 2007. So it's looking through people search and are there any people in the profiles talking about information work? And we've got just the one, conveniently, for my demo. Here's where it looks a little bit different. It's skewy on this slide because the projector's dropped down to 800 by 600, and I've caught most of the UI, but this one wouldn't normally look that ugly over on the right, but it pulls that descriptive information and puts it to the side, a bit more like a business card style than just bedding it in like a document result. We get the information, the properties, their job title, their phone number, location, email address, if you just want to fire an email. These things are then very new. I can actually view recent content. And so I can actually see content that Carol's just been working on. This is a very useful new feature. You know, if you're suddenly brought into a team or you're involved on a project, straight away finding a peer that you're working with, then going through their content is a quick way of getting up to speed. You know, yeah, they might have it all very well organised. Question?
Just one question.
Sure.
Would you be able to do that content if you had permission?
Yeah, the security trimming, good question. The question was, you know, do you have permissions? And yes, the security trimming in the search, it was there in 2007. I say yes, I haven't robustly tested it, but I see no reason for that feature to be carried forward. It's an absolute standard of internal search. You only get to see results that you can actually then access if you click on the documents. I can also see authored content too, so I can click across and see whether authored content, and there's a bit of noise here because it's just a skinny demo. So that all I can do before I've even left the search results, and if that happens to be the document I was looking for, I can click on it, boom, I'm done. Don't need to go anywhere else. But just while I'm in the search, I'm going to go straight back over to the site and search for Carol here, because she's buried down in the results a bit. But if you don't think to click on people, this is quite a nice new addition as well. It comes straight like this out of the box. I did nothing to set this up. People search is now put in that sidebar to the side of documents. I think this is a good improvement because in the past, you might have a person, some documents, another person. It was a bit messy. Now they're called out separately. Question?
Is that a web file?
Yeah. That was introduced in 2007, the concept that all the pages contain web parts that you can choose to add, remove, configure, all carries through, yes. So if you didn't want them showing, very easy to take that out. Sure.
Is anything of what you're showing limited to just enterprise CALs? Or is it...
I'll try and highlight, but I'm pretty much showing you standard. So the properties that we're seeing extracted here, that's because that managed metadata service goes right down into the standard version. What I'm not going to show you is the added features you get if you're deploying fast, for example. I think there is a session during the next 3 days that will talk about fast. That takes properties to the next level and starts to build some intelligence in. So, you're looking for information. Shouldn't you also be looking for X, Y, Z properties? And these ones are related. It gives you things like document previews inside the search results. So whereas here, if I just go back to Carol, I can view recent content, but I just get some titles. I don't get to see what's in there. If you had fast, it'll actually give you a little preview pane so you can scan the document without opening it. But these basics, they're all going in from the standard product. It's worth bearing in mind, depending on how familiar you are with how Microsoft tends to do the product versions, if a feature's available in a current product, it never gets taken out. It's part of what they're required to do. So if you can do it in standard in 2007 and you can search, for example, then it carries through to the next. It's the add-ons that almost always take on into the next version. Okay, I've just clicked on Carol. I'm now looking at Carol's what was my site in 2007, profile in 2010. You can still call them my sites. You can call them whatever you want. This is very, very different in SharePoint 2010. We still can have a picture. That's nice. You could have pictures in 2007. The properties can be extracted automatically from a directory and synchronized. That was all available in 2007. We've got a bit of a description that's just disappearing off screen here. But below here and just above it, everything's new. At the top, we've got a status, very Twitter-like. This is going to get interesting because it's a lot of change to bring into organisations to suddenly say you're going to be tweeting internally. I'm not sure, to begin with, at least for the next couple of years, how many organisations would go, oh my God, we can tweet internally. Some will, don't get me wrong. Some organisations are very into it. But people have jobs to do. People get on with things. You know, there tends to be a slight difference. But it is very much that thing. I can just highlight it, make changes. I can do it if I've got my key sorted. And it goes, oh, sorry, I'm trying to change somebody else's. I'm logged in as Bob, not Carol. If I scroll down, this all looks very different. These are all new features to 2010. We've got a simple Ask Me About feature, where if you click on it, it actually then just throws up, if I scroll down, a question to a note board. This is very Facebook-like in terms of how the profiles are evolving. We've got a notice board where I can post a message. Hi, Carol, how are you? I'm logged in as Bob, by the way, not Carol. I can post it, and there you go. Bob's sent a message onto the board. I can look at recent activities. As I scroll right back at the top, yesterday, you can see what I was doing at 11 p.m. last night. This was being built quite late. This is the activity feed for Carol. So I can see tagged some content with decisions, tagged some content with Teams. Can't think why she was doing that. Tagged some more content with search BCS. So you can see these search words. That's what's then formed that sidebar of tags that you can see in the search results. As I've been tagging things, they're automatically then extracted out into the search results. I could have left a note for someone. So it's an activity feed. If we go along, I can look at the organisation chart. If we scroll down, this is a bit more visual. You had a very basic organisation chart in 2007. It just built you a little tree hierarchy, and it's dependent on how you populated your directory. Now it's a Silverlight control inside a SharePoint, so I can go up and I can look at myself. I can look at the different people. Somebody works for Carolyn. It looks a bit of woo and a bit of wah in the way it appears on the screen, and I can see peers just disappearing to the side, so I can look at somebody else. And as you can see, these purple notes here, those are those little tweet-like statuses that you can update. Keep going along. If I look at tags and notes, I can actually look at those tags that Carol's been tagging. So I can say, oh, information seems to be pretty big to Carol, and here are all the things that have been tagged information. What I can also do is view related activities. So if I click on one of these, Carol's tagged information, but so's Fred, so's Dan. So whatever this is, this has got to be interesting. And we can put comments on this. Why is everyone tagging this? So it's all starting to wrap up this social networking capabilities into what people do with the information. And it's trying to make it short and quick so it can capture those things and roll them up and make them usable to other people. Yes, there's still an onus. We're not talking about auto-classification here. It's people that have tagged things. But by making it as quick and easy as possible, those tags can then be mined and taken advantage of. If I just then go over to the own profile, I'm logged in as Bob. Now I should be able to, yay, change it. Hello, this is the status bar. So I can type in very quickly. I can edit my profile. This is very similar to 2007. If you played with my sites, not a huge change here. We're just starting to see those keywords come through with a bit more information. I can see what I've got asked me about, so these are all my recent activities, and I can see this very simple org chart. That original org chart still on the overview, separate to the actual organisation area. We've still got colleagues, which was a way that you could in 2007, because there's a way of working with peers that doesn't necessarily mirror your organisation chart. You have a manager you report to, you may have people who report to you, but actually you work in a number of different virtual teams with colleagues. And that doesn't map to an organisation chart. And that's what the colleagues feature was introduced for. It's still here, so I can see I've got my project managers lined up here. There is another feature, and it's a question mark. And because I don't know if it's made it to RTM, it's not working in the tech preview, so I can't show you. And that is a way of creating the organisation view on a by-team basis. So by pulling out the colleagues, it'll then turn it into organisation profiles. Just before the end, I'll show you the admin interface where it is. So if you are doing hands-on play, and you can go and look at it as soon as it RTMs. But at the moment, I don't know. I hope so, because it's a very, very useful feature. Because that organisation chart's fine, but it's just one view, and it rarely maps to where the work actually gets done. This idea of having lots of sub-organisation profiles is quite interesting. At the top here, I've mostly stayed within the profile. If I go into my content, that's very similar to the old private area that you had in your My Site. So you've still got your documents, personal documents, and you could add in your inbox and so forth. And then new is my network. And this is like an Uber activity feed. And the overview of each person, I was looking at what Carol had done. But now I can actually see what all my colleagues have been up to. So Carol's been tagging, so's Graham, Emma joined a distribution list, so did Dan. The admin was up to no good. Graham's doing all sorts, updated his profile. So I get a very quick scan of an activity feed of all my colleagues. So it's all brand new to SharePoint 2010. And then if I click through any one of those tags, now I'm onto a team site. This is a SharePoint 2010 team site, the Information Worker Solutions project site. Some similarities as before. Still got our navigation. I've kept this all at the defaults to show you exactly how it installs. We've got our documents. I did create a couple of document libraries, project docs and reference docs. We've got lists, we've got discussions. For users that are already familiar with 2007, so far, fine. They'll be fine. This all looks very similar, nothing to worry about. I can add links in. Very easy. Slightly different form to fill in, but I can still put in. This is a test. And add a link in. Quite simple. If I look down at some of the documents now, we've still got the drop-down menu, we've got the different settings. If I go into Edit Properties, this stuff, God, I'd have to pick the CIA document as the one to use. Here we've got some slight differences. Still got a title area that I could fill in if I was sensible and proper, but this is one of the new features, managed keywords. I can use this to describe this document, so I might be one to use, and it's also about blog. Now you can see I haven't used those terms before. They're greyed out because it's the first time they're used. If I start typing something that has been used before, it'll actually prompt me for an autocomplete. And this will show me all other tags that start with info. So I've got Information Worker Solutions, Information Worker, Informations. Now if you can just see here on the list, two of those have got in brackets keywords. That's where they've just been tagged, whether it's in this here as managed keyword or because on a page somebody clicked tag and typed in Information Worker Solutions. That middle one that's got in bracket programs, that's actually the managed metadata service. And that's a taxonomy in the background that's been created that says, oi, can you please use Information Worker for tagging these things? So there's two types of tags building up here. Sort of that taxonomy ground up of I can just tag at will with no control, and that more hierarchical top-down, here's a structured taxonomy to work to with terminology that's consistent through the organisation. This is all brand new and is something that's going to take a lot of thought and planning when it comes to deploying SharePoint 2010. And there's at least 2 or 3 other sessions that will help you go through that process during the next couple of days. So I'm actually going to use the official Information Worker tag. Click Save. The red ones will go solid as I save it out, and they now become managed keywords. That, again, will go through to the index and help pick them up. If I scroll down, I've got some reference documents, and here it's a tiny feature, but it was supposed to be in the last version of the product and never made it, and that's a simple rating scheme. Can you rate stuff very quickly and easily just using a star system? And here, yep, I can give everything from 2 to 1. The blue is its current average rating, and now that I've rated a few, that's how I've rated the documents. So it's another way of bubbling up information, bringing popular information to the top. And that's exactly what I've done here with these reference documents. The view is set to show the most popular documents at the top. Okay, one other thing to show you here, which is a slightly new feature. We've still got a calendar, which is popular enough on a team site, and it looks like a calendar. Slightly new UI. One simple new feature that, from my perspective, a lot of my clients will be happy about, is this calendar control is now dynamic. So you can drop it into a sidebar, and it will grow and shrink the size of the calendar to fill the sidebar. Seems like a simple thing, but if you're familiar with 2007, your choices out of the box were to take up the whole page with a month view of the calendar or use a list down the sidebar, and those were your choices. Now, you can drop that month view into the sidebar and it will turn it into a little calendar month view. So there's just some simple, nice improvements there. But here's one of the particularly interesting ones. Here you can see we've got 2 colour codings here, because I'm actually looking at 2 different calendars. The ones in green, and I haven't picked the best choice of colours here, are this calendar. If I hover over one of these areas and click Add, I can put a new event in at the conference. Let's put in 2 p.m. start. Calendar, the form slightly different, but you can see the essence. If people are familiar with filling stuff in SharePoint, that will still work fine. So I've added in at the conference and it's green. These ones, though, are not part of this calendar. It's one of the new features, which is you can overlay other calendars on top of your own. So I'm seeing 2 here, but I'm going to go up to the top program site to help make that a bit more clearer. Because in the program site, I've got a calendar here again where I can put my own entries, If I click on it, I've also overlaid all the individual project site calendars. So we should, there you go, at the conference is the one that I just added on the information worker site. I've coloured them, so the IW ones are orange, developers blue, I can use, there's about 3 or 4 different colour schemes I can use, and then green are the own dates that I'm managing on this particular calendar. Again, very, very simple feature, but this ability to aggregate information between different sites just isn't there in 2007. It's a very simple addition. The way I've set this up is as each project comes on board, you automatically overlay with the program calendar that's got all your key dates in. So here I'm managing deadlines in this calendar. I might want to put a new one in and say, reports due today, and then that will automatically become visible on all those other team sites. They haven't got to remember to come up to this site to look at these dates or somehow sync them and pull them across. It just appears. So if I just save that out, I then go back up and into Information Worker. Looking at the Information Worker calendar, there's our reports due today. So it's now showing on our calendar. I don't have to step out to a different one. So this is very different. It was, question.
Could you sync that with your Outlook? Or is it too late?
I haven't tested yet, and so my assumption is no still, because there's all sorts of challenges with syncing. But until it RTMs and test for certain, I don't know. It's one to watch out. I mean, people will blog it galore near the time, and somebody else might have run a test on a later edition, so mine wasn't working. So my gut is it's probably not two-way still, just because of the complexities of doing two-way synchronization to an inbox. But I could be completely wrong, and if anybody knows difference, feel free to correct me. Good question. Okay, now just to step you through, because I've just delved through a bit that I've demoed on the spot, but I'll actually create a site from scratch so you can see the entire process. I'm going back up to the top level programs here. First things first is the Site Actions button. In the past, it would be over here up on your top right, and it's not anymore. It's over on the top left. It's just swapped sides. Personally, it drives me nuts, but I think it's because I'm left-handed. There should really, in theory, be quite a few other left-handed in the audience. You normally get a few. Fascinating side fact, 1 in 10 people are left-handed. 1 in 3 technically minded people are left-handed. Go figure. I read that about 15 years ago. I've never seen backup evidence or statistics, but I have been in meetings where everyone's left-handed, so I digress. But anyway, as left-handed, my eyes naturally tilt to the right, so I actually quite like my menus on the right, and I've talked to other left-handed people, and when they think about it, they've noticed it too. I think it's a brain thing. So for me, I'm like getting schizophrenic, going back to the left, looking for the site actions, but for the majority who are right-handed, I'm sure they'll love the site actions over here. Still the Site Actions button. It's the place to go for everything to do with the site settings. We've got quite a few new settings here. You can see synchronized to SharePoint Workspace. I'm not going to cover Workspace. That's the name formerly known as Groove. It's been renamed SharePoint Workspace. It can get a little bit confusing, so do be aware there's some name changing going on there. And that is that offline capability to sync the workspace offline, to collaborate across firewalls or with a distributed team that might be on their own hardware at home. They can collaborate on the documents and it'll synchronize seamlessly. That you do get two-way synchronization. You'll get that seamless synchronization backwards and forwards. I can create a new page, new site. I'll come back to that in a moment. I'm just going to drop right to the bottom, show you the site settings. The user interface has changed quite a lot, but actually the settings are familiar. So if you've got people that you've trained up to be site owners to take care of their own sites as an end user, they're familiar with doing those settings in 2007. They shouldn't run away screaming and kicking from 2010. A lot of those settings are still true. You can go in and do your title, description, and icon. That all looks very similar. I can play with the navigation. Site theme is a little bit different. We've still got our themes, we've got some new names, but we've also got a lot more options. You can actually customize the theme inside the browser. Very, very simple, but for personalization, this is quite useful. Side note, tip for deployment. I have never-ending battles with clients around the use of different themes on team sites. I don't know what the view is in the room. Some clients want a completely consistent look and feel across every site. They're to have a standard theme, standard logo, standard corporate colours. I actually hate that approach. And maybe it's just a personal thing, but I find it's too easy to not appreciate where you are. in the organisation. For sure, it helps, I think, to have an intranet completely standard and consistent. It has a consistent navigation structure. You know you're dealing with the intranet, and typically with an intranet, you're dealing with the more formal content. But once you're into team sites, some team sites are formal, some are a lot more informal. There are more knowledge capture, they're sharing their opinions, they're chatty, and it can be helped to know that you're in a very, very different area. So I personally, I'm quite pro using different themes, but the choices are there. If you give people site owner permissions, they'll have a ball coming up with the ugliest themes on the planet now, because they're no longer constrained to those awful selection that you had in 2007 that involved various flavours of beige, or the really bright pink or the bright green ones, or lots of blue, into they've got the whole palette to play with. So themes are a lot more flexible. So there's definitely some easier things to work with here. But the other settings, they're all there, the regional settings and so forth, you can still work with. If we go to create a new site, this is where things get a little bit different. You get a whole new control now for creating the site. And again, it's using Silverlight in the background to render a lot of this, and it'll give you a little wiggly pop-overs as I go over different templates. We've got all the categories down the left, so I can see and filter by the different types of sites that are available. If you do the all and you're like me, you keep forgetting to select a template, you'll create a lot of assets web databases as you're building SharePoint to begin with. If I create one more assets web database, I'm going to shoot myself on the next demo. It's just too easy to think, oh yeah, let me give it a title, let me give it a URL, oh, and off I go, and darn it, forgot. So do pick a template. I'm going to pick a team site. It'll be thoroughly boring. I can give it a title, so we'll go the conference, give it a URL. This is very similar before. What's slightly different here is I can go straight now and click create. I personally don't like this. I liked having the other options in your face. I have to scroll a little bit here, but the simple things around, do you want the same permissions? Do you want to use the same navigation, so have a consistent global navigation? Options are still there, but you've got to click a button to bring them up now. I think that may cause some confusion. There will be a training requirement for people that are going to be creating their own sites and doing things, because there's quite a few differences here. So I'm going to say yes, I want it to inherit the same top link bar, but then click create. Yeah, good timing while it creates the site. Yeah, in case it slows right down, I can pretend it didn't matter.
When you just say create without going into the options, is there a way of changing the defaults on the options?
What, as to what it actually says?
You might want to say, I always want to inherit the top navigation, I always want to inherit permissions across the board, so then you reduce the need to actually go into options in the first place.
Yeah, just to repeat the question, it's can you set the defaults for those options so it doesn't matter if you click that more options button? Excellent question. I honestly don't know in that I haven't tried it, but I don't see any reason why not. It is all InfoPath forms in the background. They're all form controls. So I would strongly recommend you go to Penny's session at the end of today for the SharePoint Designer, because I haven't actually done it, but I see no reason not to go into SharePoint Designer and just toggle the option around. And actually, that would probably make a very good sense. Something to think about for a site collection for the intranet, definitely. Perhaps let team sites do their own thing, but no, very good question. Okay, here we go. We've got our conference team site. This is exactly what it currently looks like. We get a big picture, so it's just off the screen. We get a welcome message, shared documents. A lot of these things are quite familiar and similar. It's how we work with them where it gets a little bit different. If I go into shared documents, here's the user interface. Looks quite a lot different if you're 2007. The first thing, and as a user, my instinct here would be, I do want to add and I will emphasise, a new document. Let me go and add a new document. Oh no, actually I'm uploading an existing document. It's a very minor point, but it's something to be aware of. Again, I'm a little bit of a rant at times on choices of terminology into the user interface, but to my mind, only because it caught me out. I was like, well, that wasn't what I planned to do. So be aware, and it's a good time as you're new to SharePoint, record your reactions. I always say this because I recorded my reactions to Office 2007 when I first used it, because that's what people are going to think. And once you get used to it, you forget very, very quickly and you know what it means. But if you are then handing over to users, they might not appreciate it and go, well, hang on, I wanted a new document. How do I actually create a new document? But I'm just going to drop a document in. And no, let's not do the presentation. That would be slightly insane. Let's find some data. In here. That'll do. So uploading a document, very straightforward still. Here I can start to put my managed keywords. So it's a default column on every document library so that you can start doing. So I can put it's a conference, for example. Don't think I've used that one before. And save out, and we're done. So I've added a document. Now, how do I create new documents straight in the document library? It's not all that obvious here. And what we need to do are click these options at the top. Because once you start clicking these options, it opens up the ribbon on the site. And this is where all the options are tucked away for doing stuff with documents. So now I've got new document, upload document, but again, it's a little bit confusing to use that word in two different contexts. Got new folder. There's a session on document sets that will explain why folders are becoming increasingly important. And if we do the drop-down arrow, that ability to have different content types, so you can select a different template, still exists. That's fine. My only concern is it's so tucked away that if you're trying to drive people to create from new inside a SharePoint, the default behaviour actually makes that harder, not easier, which is something I'm concerned. Say it could have changed for the RTM, so I reserve judgment, but be aware. Question? Sure.
Uploading multiple documents.
Yes. Let me show you.
Presumably that's still there, and will it just allow you to load them all without setting any keyword?
It will, but it's the same in that they'll be blank. So it's the same principle as before, and that follows through from 2007. When you upload multiple documents, the UI, again, has changed slightly. And I'm on the fence with this one at the moment. I think we'll learn to love it, but it is different. We've got a drag and drop option. I never have Windows Explorer in the right place to do drag and drop. So I've automatically switched to browse. But now it's a shift and select rather than those little check boxes. Now, those check boxes, quite frankly, if you know to do shift and select, will drive you nuts because it's a bit laborious to go check, check, check. Oh, I missed it. Oh, darn it. I've just clicked the document. It's open. But it depends on the user. For a lot of users, that makes it very obvious which documents they're uploading. So pros and cons here. So I've just highlighted two. They're added automatically to the bottom. Click open. It'll show you what it's about to add, so you can actually make adjustments at the end. And I think this is definitely an improvement. It's quite a tidy interface. Shows you it's two, shows you the total upload size. Do train people to take note of the upload size when they go and put a 500 megabyte movie into their upload settings. And then click OK, off it goes. And actually the UI is quite nice and slick for this. Done. And we've got multiple documents in, so yeah, no prompt to do it. If I want to do the prompt, then I go in, edit the properties, and I can get straight back into it. If I do conference now, yeah, there we go. Conference has become a keyword, and job done. Whilst we're here, this ribbon's also important from the library perspective, because I'm working with documents now, new, upload, and the workflows. We're not going to cover those areas, we certainly haven't got time. But there's managing the library itself. And if we click over on library, these are where you get all the library settings. I've got my views, which are over here now. They used to be sort of buried down at the right or under the library settings. I can create a view, I can look at the current view, and I can modify. This is looking a little uglier, I must stress, on the projector because the resolution shrunk it down a lot. So you can normally see those. They're a bit more visible on a normal monitor. But if I just simply want to get to the settings, they're tucked away over here. Go into library settings. Let's get in it. There we go. And somewhat familiar again. If people are familiar with going into document library settings in 2007, this shouldn't really scare them. Title, description, question.
Just as far as the ribbon and everything that's cross-browser support?
Oh, this is an overview session. Officially, cross-browser support is meant to be very good. I just honestly haven't got Firefox loaded up to test it. Oh, brilliant. Feedback is it's good. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly meant to be. There's been a huge emphasis on standards and having that cross support, and I think they've just got to. You can't limit to just Internet Explorer. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so fingers crossed, looking good. Question?
Versioning settings, are those still off by default?
Yeah, you've got to select to put them in. There is a prompt when you create a new document library, do you want versioning? In fact, let's do that. As we're playing around, that's what this is for. If I go in, and go into site actions. Now, if I go into, I've got to remember how to create a library. I've forgotten. My brain's gone blank. Oh, there we go. And it's partly why, because I mean, I've been playing with this since November, but still, you can have blind spots. again, make note, because if you have blind spots as a techie, then definitely end users are going to. So to create stuff, we've got new site, new page. I've actually got new document library. It's suggesting it. It's saying, oh, the kind of things on this type of site, I'll bet you want to create a document library. But for everything else, they're tucked under more options. So just be aware, if you click onto more options, then you get into everything. So we've got libraries and lists. But the user interface, again, like creating a site, is very different to what it was in 2007. We've got them all. So again, people will be creating lots and lots of announcements if you forget to change the template and just put the title in. And we've got them clustered by their type. So library, a lot of these settings are going to be familiar. We've got document, picture, so forth, and all the different lists. So we've got all the lists there. It's just a different user interface. So I'm going to create a very simple document library. I give it a name. So let's call it reports. I can go at that point and click create, but to answer your question, more options. And once you go to more options, then you get those same settings. Do you want it on the quick launch? Do you want to create a version every time? And that question follows through. This is an InfoPath form. It's using controls. So if you did want to switch the defaults over, you could probably force it through there or deploy a separate solution. Okay, I'm just going to click create. And we've got a shiny new document library. Again, we can add documents to it. We've got all the settings. Go into the library settings. It's a completely clean one. All those controls, again, still in the library settings. So you've got your versions, your advanced settings. Some of the new things, one of them is the rating settings. Ratings, it's simply, do you want to enable it or not? Do you want the ability to have that 5-star rating system? If I click yes, click OK, then go back into, let's have a look at my document library. Let's add one in. This is an interesting. I've actually picked one that I just uploaded some content from my other computer. This is a presentation downloaded from last year's SharePoint conference held in Las Vegas. This keyword has automatically come in. I am assuming because it was originally installed on a SharePoint inside of Microsoft, so it's actually pulled the keywords across and dropped them in, because that will happen between SharePoints. If you go from one SharePoint environment to another, all of those properties will get pulled over. They won't if you save it as an Adobe PDF and then add again. But if it's PowerPoint, Office, anything, then those properties, again, good and bad. On the one hand, fantastic time saver. I don't need to bother tagging it, as long as those tags are still relevant when they're in a different environment. So pros and cons, and something to definitely think about. But now I've also got my rating, 5 stars, of course. I can rate it straight away, click save. And when you put rating in, it just automatically puts that visibility into it, onto the document library. So it's just another type of column. Ratings was originally going to be introduced as a sort of an add-on, a fix into 2007. It never quite made it, and now it's just default out of the box. But let's show you the calendar, which is the more fun. So we've got a blank calendar in our brand new team site. I can hover over anything and add in an event. Team meeting. But hopefully here, it's starting today. I'm going to make it a recurring meeting. Every month. First Tuesday, that'll do. End after 10. Now you can see I can click down to save, or this ribbon does follow through to the form. So any time you can start using the save function there. And I click save, and I wonder where it just went. Let me hit refresh. Let me cry, because it did this to me last night. So we're having the gobbling moment where it eats all appointments as I create them. We'll see if we can get that one to come back. But how to get the other calendar to also appear here? I'm in the calendar view, but it's the same principle as the document library. Once I go up here, you can see I've got events, which will bring up the ribbon relating to creating events. And I've got the calendar, which will bring me up effectively the library settings, well, the list settings for this calendar. And you can see I've got different ones. I can create my views again. I can change the type of default view. And I've got list settings. If I click there, just the same as before. But this is the new feature. Just next to list settings is calendars overlay. And if I click on that, I can add additional calendars. I'll click on new calendar, give it a name, key dates. Choose the type of calendar, and you can see we can pick from SharePoint or Exchange. So you can overlay calendars direct from Exchange into SharePoint, which may avoid the need for the crossway synchronization, because if you're looking at Exchange, it gets you around that problem completely, and I think that's the route most people will take. Okay, we can put a description if we want to help explain why we're doing this overlay. We've got some very simple colours here. For some reason, they went very pastel-y with these colours. We've got pinks and ice blues and whites and light blues. I'm going to go for light turquoise. And you just need to put the web URL which you want to resolve that has a calendar. Now, I'm in the conference site. I'm just going to go up a level. It's really easy for me to do. I want to get into the programs URL. Click resolve, it'll then query that site and see if it's got any calendars on it. And if it has, then you can pick one. It has, and it's got one and only one calendar. So I picked that one. You can choose to always show, although it pretty much keeps it unless you take it out. Click OK. Now if I click on my calendar, I have the overlays coming in. So now I'm viewing the entries from that other calendar in my own calendar. Can't change those entries, they're elsewhere. If I try, if I've got permissions, it'll take me to that calendar where those changes are made. But it does avoid this sort of yo-yoing between having, well, I work on this site, but there's information important to this site held in a different site. Being able to overlay it is just a huge potential time saver. Okay, back into the home page. Oh, and our shared documents have started to fill up and gone a bit ugly, which is perfect timing. We'll actually have a look at the home page. In the past, you'd go up, if it was a team site, you'd have a little edit page link over to the right if you had the permission to do edit, and you can add and remove web parts. This is quite a little bit different. You can see we've got a page button up here, and these are the two that you toggle between. If you're just viewing content and looking at stuff, you're browsing, when you start editing, just click on page and that brings your ribbon up, and that gets you all your options. You can do some various different things. One interesting feature throughout, which IT may or may not like, is you can elect to make this your home page. And so as it pulls it up there, I've just changed the home page by default from a browser. I don't know. Before anyone puts their hand up and asks me, can group policy reset it, I would assume probably so. Group policy usually wins out on these things. But if you don't, and you do allow people to choose what their home page is, again, why not? It's partly my argument. If every day they had click straight out to where they go, because you've got the overlays and you've got things like content query and roll-up web parts, if there's any important information, just have it so it gets displayed on all the different sites. It's still only in one location, it's just visible in multiple locations, and let people start where they're going to do their work. But back to this, if we look at this, if we go into edit mode, I'm going to edit the home page, and this is quite a lot different to 2007. We've still got web parts, they've not gone anywhere. If I hover over shared documents, this is indeed a web part. I can edit the web part. And if I scroll across, and apologies, this is where my projector's killing me a little bit. Whoa, look, that should look familiar to everyone. We still have our tool pane. I can choose and switch to whatever views. It's actually a lot more rigid around views, or it was in the beta. Again, I don't know if it'll be added, the link will be put back in for RTM. But in 2007, you can modify views from wherever you are on a home page, and it can create quite a mess in the background in terms of views. At the moment, you can't. So if I want a different view from in the list, I have to go to that library, create the view, then come back, and then it'll be in the list and available to select. So that's a slight difference in behaviour. We'll just click OK and use a summary. That will do. That's a bit better. But here's where the difference are. In the past with SharePoint, it was mostly an either-or. You either were looking at a team site which had web parts, and if you wanted to put content in the background of the page, you'd typically cheat. You'd use the content editor web part. You'd set the web part properties so it defaults to not showing its title or border, so it looks like it's in the background. And then you click on the rich text editor, put all your content in, click OK, and then it would appear as if it had been edited on the page. Really laborious process. And one, I don't know if people are aware, if you were using any kind of personalisation, I found this one out the hard way, if you had those audience targeted, going in and changing the rich text editor would reset the audience. So all of a sudden, if you've got a hidden admin note, you lose the audience settings each time you change. It was just one gotcha in 2007. Very different in this. If I just click anywhere around here, this just is editable area. I can just type now straight into the page. Hello world. Oh, I could even try deleting as I go along. Take it out. Oh, I could try if I could hit anything. There we go. I'm being punished for using a Mac here because there is no delete. I keep hitting the backspace. And so I can type, and I can type either side. So if I go at the bottom of the web part, hello again, I can keep typing. It's more of a canvas for putting stuff on. You've still got zones to a degree. You can see I've got a border around the main area. I've got a border to the right. This is a page layout. And yes, you can have different page layouts. You can have your top, your bottom, your three in the sections in the middle for adding web parts. But the way it behaves is a lot different. Now, to show you adding a web part in, I'm just going to hit enter a bit. This is quite a lot different in 2010. Back up to the ribbon, click insert, and here I can now insert content onto this page. I can drop a table in because, you know, it has to be said, Microsoft does seem to load tables. Web designers seem to hate Microsoft for loving tables quite so much. Let's put them in the pages everywhere. But you still can. You can put pictures in, links. But here's the one that's likely to be used the most. I can drop my web parts in. A very, very different user interface now. I've got my categories of different web parts. I can see what I've got. I've got some content roll-ups. Session coming up on that later today. I've got the available lists and libraries. All the same capabilities, but this UI is very, very different. So I can pick, in fact, let's pick my reports. I'm going to add it. And there we go. I've dropped it down on the page and dropped my reports in. Same process now. I can edit, I can delete, I can minimize, I can mess around with the page. So the pages are quite different. When I'm done, I can just click save, and we're back out. And when you click save, it'll push you straight back into the browse mode automatically. If you want to carry on, flip over to the page, you've got that ribbon back. But it's quite a different way of working with the UI.
So is it possible yet to change the page layout?
The page layout. Inside the browser, you can change from the available list. So if I go into the page, I don't think I'm going to have a lot on this particular one. Let me just... No, because I've already foreset this. But depending on the type of library you choose, out of the box, you get a minimal range. So, and it is a little bit tricky in the tech preview. A lot of things defaulted to the wiki page. You had to create a separate library and say, I want web pages, and then you got the whole range of web page layouts.
The reason I ask is because I was used to if you created a page layout, so a new page, and you chose 3 colours, and then you thought, actually, no, I don't want that, I want something else. You basically scrap it and start.
Actually, no, you didn't. It's a really hidden way of doing it. When you create pages in 2007, sorry, it's completely side to the conversation, you can go up into the page settings, but actually if you go into the library where the page is stored, go into its properties, you can change the template and get to all of them. One of those just silly little gotchas that never really got documented, so that's where you don't have to delete them. And that will still carry through. So if I go into the site pages, for example, which is where they are here, go into the properties. I don't think there'll be much here yet because I haven't allowed any templates. But yeah, you'll actually have a drop-down box with the full set listed. Okay, time is rumbling on. So just to finish very quickly, I'm going to show you some of the tagging because I haven't really done any. I'm now in absolute love with my page. So just to speed up, I'm going to hit the tags and notes. And I can tag the page. I can tag any page, any document. I can tag whatever I want. So let's use my favourite tag of the moment. I can then, yeah, there you go, it'll prompt me because it already exists. I can put a note against the page. Hello world. All very good. And it'll add in. And as other people do, so you can see that related activities in. And in fact, if I go up, let me get to the top level. If I tag this page, there we go. We've already got a few, I've already done it, including me. So you can see I've got a note here, I've got tags. So you can actually see what other people are already using. Part of that purpose is to help avoid everybody creating their own little world of tags, because that is going to happen. It's inevitable to some degree. I don't want to call it programs. I'm going to call it progs because I can. There is going to be a certain amount, but by seeing what others tagged, and it will actually make suggestions for you. So you can see here, suggested tags, because that's what other people tagged this particular page with. So it will help you to suggest you. But I could put anything I want in here. I could put bonkers if I wanted. I can type whatever the hex I want. The reason I hate the I like it so much, because if I click on it, it tags the page with the phrase I like it. I personally am not a big fan of it. It has to be said. That goes away, and Paul, Mr. Turner, who's presenting it alongside, he agrees. So that's 2 of us that's got our vote. But to show you where this all goes on, I'm just going to finish by showing a little bit in the background of the administration. Here is the new central administration for SharePoint. So going more into the IT Pro side, it is quite a bit different. I say quite a bit, it's a lot different to central admin in 2007. It warns you when your demo's a mess. Actually, none of these issues are particularly serious. It's telling me off for using the same account for 2 different things. But getting to stuff is quite different in this. At the moment, I can manage web applications, I can create site collections, but if I want to get to things like search, it's not particularly obvious from the list here. How do I get to search? They're all tucked under managed service applications, and you get a full list. It's actually much more grown up because the way you can administer, architect, and maintain the services to run and scale SharePoint are frankly quite phenomenal in this version. There's a lot of work gone into it, and it's good stuff. But it does make it a little bit less intuitive. So if I scroll down, I can get down to my search settings, which I'll just show you quickly. Because once you click on search service, as long as you're using the latest version of SharePoint 2007 with the infrastructure update, you should have the search dashboard. If you can do federated search, you've got the latest version. This should all look familiar because it's very similar. I can go in and do my file type, set my PDF indexing up, I've got my content sources I can index. At the moment on the tech preview, and I'm hoping this is improved for RTM, you get a little bit lost once you're in here, and I've got no breadcrumb easily to get back up. It just doesn't give me much of anything, so it should be better. But I have to go back up into central administration, back into managed service applications, and then here's the biggie new one, the managed metadata service. This is what looks after all those keywords. And this will show you the two different types, just to very quickly wrap up. Under system, these are all the keywords that people have been using. So as they get used, they'll get added to this list. And so you can see somebody wrote War and Peace, that somebody would be me, before hitting a comma. We've got some different words here, they're listed alphabetically. If I hover over one, I can move the keyword. And this is what's quite interesting. If certain words are getting tagged all the time in folksonomy style, but they don't currently exist in your hierarchical taxonomy, you can move them. You can actually move them from that folksonomy flat view into the hierarchy, and it'll pull all the current tagged content with it. Nice feature. You know, again, back to some deployment tips. Really try to avoid crafting that perfect hierarchy from the start. If you want some hierarchy, fine. If there's certain obvious bits to put in, but don't sweat blood and tears getting that taxonomy crafted to the nth degree. Let it be discovered, because you can promote those tags into the hierarchy. And if there's one thing that's absolutely certain with taxonomy, it changes over time. You know, Microsoft, when I left Microsoft at the end of 2005, I can tell you, if I searched for things like cloud computing back then, there wouldn't have been much stuff. Yet now, you know, you'd be, oh, thank you for 10 million results back. You know, apparently 70% of the people are working on different cloud computing initiatives. You know, language changes and evolves over time. And that ability to promote the keywords in and out is quite interesting. To show you the hierarchy, and this is the final bit, because I appreciate I'm running close to time. It sits under each site collection, and as always, there are certain settings that are site collection bound. So here's the site collection. The other one's another test site I've got running in the background. This is the one that I've been working with, and here I just created a very simple hierarchy. So if you can remember back to that where I showed you when I was adding in a keyword, and it made 3 suggestions for information. Information worker solutions, information worker, and information. And one of them was bracketed programs. That's because I've got information worker here as part of my taxonomy, my hierarchy. And that's where that reference was coming from. If I want to add terms here, I can just create a term set and put in, I've already got development, something else. Can't spell. End user. And I've added a term into my hierarchy, and so I can keep going, I can create, I can reuse, I can, SharePoint, build up. Is it the perfect taxonomy tool? Unlikely. It's version 1. I mean, it is, being honest. You know, it gives you a hierarchy. If you're an information architecture purist, you'll start talking about polynomial hierarchies and having cross-pollination of taxonomies across different term sets. That's not going to be easy to do out of the box with SharePoint. There'll be partners that are going to be building add-ons to do the really advanced stuff. But in an awful lot of organisations, those hierarchies rarely get used to their full extent. They tend to be for a limited subset, a library, a repository of specific R&D content that needs to be classified. So don't get too, my advice is don't get too hung up. Leverage it to make stuff easier to find rather than thinking of a perfect library system. But again, we can delete, move things around and change it. One of the issues that you'll need to be considering from a deployment perspective again is you can specify the users who can manage the metadata service. So this can be delegated out to business users. It doesn't have to be a technology function, but it is going to bring them into the central administration interface. So it's something again to consider when it comes to training. Okay, I'm amazed I'm not getting shouted at, but I'm pretty sure I'm out of time without looking at an agenda. So let me just quickly flip back. I've just given you, for an hour, a very, very brief overview of some of the new features that are coming down the line into SharePoint 2010, and hopefully we'll set the scene for some of the sessions you'll go to over the next 3 days. I threw this slide up, and I'm pretty sure all three have still survived. The agenda was a little bit fluid still last night as we got people arriving at different times. But the ones that will delve into these topics in a little bit more detail, we've got what's new in content types and managed metadata. What we were just looking at was the managed metadata service. So if you want to find out more about that, including the things like being able to import sets, because you can actually import term sets and pre-populate the taxonomy, very useful. Craig's session's coming at 1:15. In terms of web parts, content queries, the ability to roll stuff into and aggregate information up, there's some improvements there. So if you're interested in that side and how to aggregate and display information, go to Brett's session. And then finally, I really would recommend having a look at the SharePoint Designer, because I've just shown you everything inside the browser. But there's a huge improvements in terms of actually just working in SharePoint Designer for moving things around, setting page layouts, setting defaults, how you have things as easy as possible so that people just create a site, upload content, and get up and running as quickly as possible. So I admit I was hoping to get the full week, but the agenda's a little fluid, so you'll have to check how the agenda fleshes out. If you're particularly interested in search, I'm back on at 8:45, 8:45 in the morning, so I won't be drinking too much tonight, where I'll be doing a findability session for both the current version and future version of SharePoint. Just to wrap up and conclude, SharePoint 2010 does look quite a lot different. Actually, if you've got organisations that are only just thinking about rolling out 2007, it makes it a big project, but do think about whether those things can come side by side, because if you're going to train on one of those user interfaces, you might as well train on both, because that initial concept of, whoa, this ribbon appeared, and oh, now all of a sudden I can get access to everything I wondered where it was. Oh, there it is. That initial shock, and it is a bit of a shock, but it eases very, very quickly. Kill two birds with one stone and get them looking at both interfaces at the same time. Other than that, I'm running over by 5 minutes. I'm breaking into your coffee break. So unless there's any questions, you are allowed to leave the room. And thank you very much. Thank you.